Ladies and gentlemen, students of President University, welcome to today's panel discussions on the dynamic intersection of law and diplomacy in the international arena. My name is Dini Pane, and I am delightful to be the moderator for today's discussions. Before we dive into our discussions, let me introduce our esteemed panelists who bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to our conversations. Joining us today are Abraham Lee and Jennifer Landseidel. You may enter the stage. Okay, so we have Abraham Lee. He is the director of Ad America from June 2023, and he previously served in various countries and cities, including Ho Chi Minh, Warsaw, Kuwait. Before that, he was a public affairs specialist working on human trafficking issues for the Department of State in Washington. He also has been a special assistant U.S. attorney in D.C. and also spent time doing public affairs for NGO working with North Korea refugees. And we also have Jennifer Landseidel, attorney advisor for in the Office of the Legal Advisor. She is currently serving in Office of the Legal Advisor for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs, where she advises on cultural property, international expos, including Expo 2025 Osaka, American Spaces, department engagements with film and TV productions, international broadcasting, and First Amendment issues. She has served as the legal advisor or head of delegations on multiple U.S. delegations. Ms. Landseidel earned her Juris Doctor from University of California, Berkeley, and her Bachelor of Arts from University of Pennsylvania. Now, without further ado, let's kick things off with some questions to know better our panelists. The first question is, what is the role of the Office of the Legal Advisors? And what kinds of roles do you specifically play in the State Department? Maybe we can start with Ms. Landseidel.
Hello, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here. Everybody can hear me okay. This is my first time in Jakarta, and it's just such a pleasure to have the chance to talk with you today. The Office of the Legal Advisor is really the General Counsel's office for the Department of State, which is our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We are over 200 lawyers who advise department policy officials on all of the legal issues that come up in the implementation of foreign policy. I have specifically served in 6 different offices. One of the great things about our role is that we have the opportunity to rotate around to different portfolios to have a chance to experience different and practice different types of international law. So my first office was mostly doing international arbitration, representing the United States before international tribunals. My second office focused on law enforcement and intelligence activities, extradition work. At the time I was in that office, Somali piracy became a big thing, and I ended up advising on the capture of pirates and the prosecution of pirates in courts in East Africa and in the United States. That was something, when I was in law school, I never thought that I would end up working on. I also then moved to an office where I worked on nuclear arms control issues, a lot of US-Russia negotiations. I then moved to our environment office, had a chance to work on climate change negotiations, other sorts of multilateral environment treaties. And then I was in our consular office, which is our visa and passport and American citizen services issues. In that office, I mostly worked on visa matters. And then to my current portfolio in the Office for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs, which is actually what brings me to Jakarta, was really to see, frankly, one of the reasons I wanted to come was to see this space. Because one of the things that I advise on is our American Spaces program around the world, and I had never actually set foot in one. And maybe you know, but Ad America is sort of one of our flagship, sort of most famous American spaces, and we hear a lot about it in Washington, D.C. So again, I feel very fortunate to be here. So that is the Office of the Legal Advisor.
Okay, and Mr. Lee, can you maybe share with us a bit about your role in the State Department? I see you have like a really broad range of specialties. Like you worked as special assistant of U.S. Attorney, but now you are the director of Ad America. Can you please share with us your roles in the State Department?
Sure. Selamat siang, teman-teman, adik-adik, bapak, ibu, ya. So I'm the director for Ad America. I'm a public diplomacy officer. I've worked also as a consular officer in previous tours. I was a special assistant U.S. attorney, so I did criminal law. So I was a prosecutor for a little bit. And then I also worked on trafficking issues, and I also worked with refugees. So what's interesting about that is that I tell everyone, and maybe hopefully you guys know this as law students, that the skills you learn as a law student really are applicable anywhere, in almost any field, whether it's international relations, whether you want to be a lawyer for the ministry or a criminal attorney, whether you want to go into finance or business. Really, the opportunities are endless. And so one of the things Jennifer and I were talking about before is, I wish I'd have known that when I was in school, that there were all these other opportunities out there for us. And so part of what I do here is I'm a public diplomacy officer. We do lots of programs here at Ad America and across our American spaces in Indonesia. But every day, I'm using the skills I learned in law school, like speaking to you today and being able to engage with audiences all over Indonesia.
Great, great. I want to ask to the participants first, who here is law school students, like law students? Okay, so most of the participants today are law students. I want to ask to both of you, like since our participants are mostly law students, can you share with us your journey from law school to your current role at the State Department? Like how did your experience at the university shape your path?
So I'll go first. So I thought that I wanted to be a lawyer from a pretty young age. I think my 6th grade English teacher got it in my head that that would be a good career for me. So I was already thinking about it. In the United States, as you might know, law is a graduate program. So I went to a 4-year undergrad university, but with this idea of taking classes and picking a major that would support later going to law school. I also had a very formative experience in high school. I grew up in Virginia in the United States, had not done a lot of foreign travel, but had the opportunity to study in Argentina when I was, it was the summer before my senior year in high school. I learned a lot about the history in Argentina at the time in the 1990s. They were really reconciling with difficult periods of their history. As many of you know, there was an authoritarian government in Argentina. Many people disappeared, and there were families who were still looking for information about what had happened to their family members during that really dark time in their history. And it was very eye-opening for me. And I went back. I committed to learning Spanish. I wish I could say that I was fluent to this day. But I at that point I sort of wanted to marry the two interests. I wanted to try and do a career in international law. So I majored in international relations at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. I studied abroad. You know, I took every travel experience that I could get. I studied abroad in Spain. After school, I actually worked. I wanted to be sure before I committed to law school. So I worked in a legal office as a paralegal to see lawyers sort of up close and practicing, and that didn't scare me away from becoming a lawyer. So I went to law school, and again, was fortunate enough to take lots of classes in international law, have professors that actually were the ones who told me about the opportunity at the State Department to practice public international law. And then I also, in law school, was able to do yet another study abroad program. I worked in El Salvador on a USAID program advising the Salvadoran Congress. So that's a bit about my journey, but I do think it was a winding one in some respects, but always kind of with a sense that the law would be a good fit for me.
And Mr. Lee, can you share with
Yeah,
us?
sure. So I also knew I wanted to go to law school pretty early. My parents told me I like to talk a lot and I like to argue a lot, so I should be a lawyer. I studied economics, though, in university, and then I went to law school. I always thought I would be a criminal attorney. And then after law school, I had this itch to go overseas. So I took a break, which was not normal, but I went to teach English in China for a year, and then a year turned into 2 years, and then 2 years turned into 3 years, and I began working with North Korean refugees. So this really changed my perspective. I was looking very much at kind of international relations, and so I joined the State Department. And then I was lucky enough to do 1 year at the U.S. Attorney's Office to practice criminal law, and then came back to my job at the State Department, and have been a diplomat since 2014. So also winding and maybe not the typical path, but I always tell people there isn't a typical path. There's only the path that's right for you. So I encourage you to think about that as you think about your career. Don't be afraid to do something new or even crazy based on what others are doing, and do what's right for you.
Okay, since we're a little bit tight in schedule, so we're gonna have to wrap up these sessions. But before, could you share with us memorable or interesting moments or experience from your time serving in the State Department?
Sure, I'm happy to. I would say one of the highlights of my career was working on the negotiation of the Paris Agreement on climate change. I was part of the U.S. delegation to that negotiation. We worked throughout. I joined the delegation in 2015. There had frankly already been quite a bit of work done. The night that agreement was adopted, the fact that we were able to bring all of the countries there together on one page of paper, really, right? Like one text. It was just an extremely hopeful moment for this enormous crisis. It wasn't the end of the story at all, but that was a really I have a lot of pride that I was able to participate in that and be a part of that moment. So that's my answer.
The most recent one, I think, is when we closed our embassy in Afghanistan. You may have seen in the news, there were many people getting on planes. So I was in Kuwait at the time, and Kuwait was one of our transit locations. So I was on the ground when the first plane from Afghanistan landed in Kuwait. And so it was a really interesting experience helping people who literally brought their entire life with them on this plane and didn't really know where they were going. And so we had to very quickly be able to accommodate I think it was ultimately over 5,000 evacuees from Afghanistan through Kuwait onto the United States and other places. So I just remember not getting a lot of sleep, but also feeling a very rewarding experience, being able to help people, and kind of, I always wonder what happened to those folks and where they are now. But the fact that they may have this opportunity at this new life and maybe hopefully a better life, and having been a part of that in some small way. This is not really a lawyer thing, but part of the cool job that I get to do as a diplomat.
Okay, great. So now let's move on to the next sessions of these discussions, the question and answer. I would encourage each of you participants to actively engage with our panelists. So if anyone here has any questions, please raise your hand. Maybe one from this section and one from this section. Oh, okay. Okay.
Hello, my name is Rofelino, and I'd like to ask, since, ma'am, you're a lawyer, recently President Biden passed a bill that was passed by Congress to prohibit the use of TikTok in the United States should they not sell to an American company within the next 9 months. Do you think that goes against the right to free speech, since TikTok is used as a social media, and social media is known for free speech? What is your opinion on that?
Well, that is an excellent question. That law has actually been passed since I've been on travel, so I haven't even had a chance to read it or study it. We've been traveling in the region for the last 2 weeks. We went to Japan before coming to Indonesia, again, as part of an effort to see how public diplomacy sections operate. And I will say one thing that has become very clear to me is the importance of social media to what we do. And obviously that's one of the reasons, right, is because it's a way to reach all of you. And so I think, it's a difficult this question of TikTok, that the idea that the US government is just going to not engage on a particular platform. At the same time, I think there are some legitimate concerns for us with that platform, and obviously our Congress and our president feels the same way. So I think going forward, as some of you may know, the United States is a place where we have a lot of litigation. People are not afraid to go to court, and I would not be surprised if there were legal challenges to this law. So I think what I would say is watch this space. It could be very interesting, and I think it's a very good question to identify the potential First Amendment concerns with a law like that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lee, would you also like to share your thoughts?
I don't have any thoughts on TikTok. I think Jennifer said it all. Although, to her point, I do think this is something that will continue to be talked about. So I think it's a story that is still to be continued.
Okay, do we have any more questions? Okay.
Thank you for this opportunity. You mentioned before that you are working on climate change, which is you're gonna face a lot of like climate crisis or so on. So I do really want personally to be part of that. And I want to ask that what is the obstacle or the excited things when you're working your job? Thank you.
Just to understand the question, obstacles to working on that issue?
Yes, and the excited things when you work on there. Thank you.
Oh, so one thing I will say is that I think one of the reasons that I really enjoyed advising on that issue for the State Department was it was some of the youngest policy officials that I've had as clients. Extremely passionate, true experts in, as I'm sure you can appreciate, a lot of them were scientists, had very hard science backgrounds that they were then bringing to the policy space to try and come up with solutions for this global crisis. I think the obstacle, I think anxiety is a good word for it. I think it was one of the more, we would be sitting in these negotiating rooms and you had small island states, and for them this is an existential crisis. I mean, for all of us, but the passion, sometimes those negotiations became quite heated. And sometimes it was frustrating that we had, in the United States, unfortunately, we do have certain legal constraints. We have to have domestic laws that allow us to implement the obligations that we're taking on at the international level. And that meant that we require Congress to fund commitments we make at the international level. So there was a limit to what we could agree to. And I always had a lot of empathy when other countries needed to sort of express how frustrating that was for them. So I would say it was difficult, but as I mentioned, it was also very rewarding to ultimately, in that context, get to an agreement that every country could support. So I hope that answers your question.
All right, I think we have the time to squeeze in one more question. So if anyone has one more question, please raise your hand. Okay.
Uh, I'm Shin. I'm from Myanmar, and because of the Myanmar military coup, there's so many people in the borderline area of Thailand applying for the refugee status, and I was also one of the person applying for the refugee status in U.S. But there's so many people waiting to get refugee status in U.S. As advisors. Is there any advice for the people who are waiting for the refugee status in the borderline area or Thailand? Yeah.
That's an excellent question. So I think obviously the process itself is, I know, a complicated one and often takes quite a bit of time. But can I ask, you said you're a law student here?
Yeah.
Okay. What year?
I'm transfer student.
Oh,
Credit transfer student.
Will you finish here?
2 years.
2
After
years.
2 years.
Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like you're doing something really great with your time while you're waiting for your status. I mean, I can't speak to the process itself. I think it's also dependent on every individual case as well. But what I can say, having worked on refugee issues, is that I know they're often very complicated and very difficult. I really appreciate the fact, though, that you're here in Indonesia and you're taking advantage of your opportunity to study law, to come to Ad America, and to engage in this discussion. One of the great things that I've also seen is that oftentimes those who have either been former refugees or are refugees often become the strongest advocates for refugees. And so as you go through this process, as you learn the skills to be a lawyer, and I hope that you'll become an advocate and a voice for those who may be going through similar situations as you are in the future, because I think that's a really powerful voice that you have, given your experience and now your education. I hope that you'll actually be an advocate for refugees in the future, and maybe be able to advocate either for stronger protections, maybe quicker processes, but really create that framework so that while you may have to wait now, hopefully in the future, maybe people will not actually have to wait as long as you did. So good on you, and I hope that, and good luck. But I also really hope you take that and actually use it for some, to give back, to really do even greater good for the future.
Thank you.
Okay, so turns out we still have more time for another question. So if anyone here has more questions, please do raise your hand. And if, oh, okay, we have one over there. And if anyone of you who have asked questions has some follow-up questions, please feel free to ask.
Yeah. Thank you so much. My name is Jonathan. I would like to ask more about the how United States of America could assure us, especially us as the Indonesian citizens, like we love America, all of us love America, but knowing what happened right now, we are being polarized and divided into like the Western world and then the global South, and Indonesia is one of the rising power in South Asia, even in Asia itself. I would like to ask from your opinion, your thoughts. So many people are opposing to the fact that we are strengthening our diplomatic relation with United States and like preferring to have or conduct diplomatic relationship in a deeper level with China, for example, due to the distrust and also like the concern that the United States will dictate the values that we have here in Asia. How would you assure that for Indonesian citizens, for people in Indonesia, that America is the best friend of Indonesia? Thank you.
That's a great question. And I think I've only been here since June, but even in the brief time I've been here, I think our relationship is very strong and probably the strongest it's ever been. Some of you may have seen the video that we saw early on. This year is our 75th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the United States and Indonesia. And so last year, President Jokowi visited the White House, and we recently elevated the bilateral relationship to the highest level possible, which is a comprehensive strategic partnership. We're seeing huge investments through our Millennium Challenge Corporation, these Millennium Challenge Compacts, the Just Energy Transition Partnership. So we really do have what I consider a very strong and really kind of diverse relationship, meaning economics, political, security, education, cultural, and really the best part of my job is the people-to-people relationship. More than ever, we're seeing more students studying in the United States from Indonesia. I think we need more. So I hope all of you will consider, whether it's through LPDP or through ISMO or some of these other programs that we have. We have Education USA advising right outside, so feel free to take advantage of that service. I want more students studying in the United States. We have cultural relationships, so we have a partnership with the Smithsonian and the National Museum currently going on. We have Fulbright. So, I mean, the relationship we have is really diverse. And, you know, what I will say is, you know, Indonesia and the United States represent the second and third largest democracies in the world. So we share a lot of values: human rights, freedom, elections. You just had an election. We're going to have an election this year. So really, there's so much that we share in terms of our values. Of course, you know, we have E pluribus unum, right? One nation under God. You have Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, right? Berbeda-beda tetapi tetap satu, right? So this is really like at the heart of our relationship, is that we are diverse, but yet we celebrate our diversity as one nation, as Americans and as Indonesians. So, you know, I really do think, you know, in terms of our relationship, I feel like as someone who's been here for almost a year, I feel like we've really strengthened our relationship, and there's so much room for us to continue to grow and strengthen that relationship. So I really appreciate that question, and I really appreciate the chance to kind of engage on this level, right? Because our governments are talking, but also it's great that Jennifer and I get to talk to you as I think the future leaders of Indonesia, and I believe that that relationship will continue to grow through discussions like that ones that we're having today.
Okay, so the question and answer session is now over. And to wrap up our whole sessions, could both of you please give an advice for law students who is interested in pursuing a career in international law, particularly within the government institutions like the State Department? Maybe we can start from Ms. Lensail.
Sure. Well, I would encourage you to do that. I have certainly found it very rewarding. If you're looking for concrete advice, I think that Abraham and I show that there's a lot of different ways to get there. So it's important that it's right for you. But I would encourage you to take opportunities to travel and to study abroad, to work abroad. That, for me, was very key in developing the passion for international law and for international relations and communities that I think is really important to being an international lawyer. I would also encourage you to nurture curiosity and empathy. It's very important when I'm in a room having a difficult conversation about climate change that you know, I really want to understand where the other country's delegate is coming from. We might have very different experiences, but if we are going to agree in the end on common text, then I have to really understand what is motivating them and what is important to them for that document that we're working together on. So it's, and then I would just say being passionate about international law, believing in international law, because it's a very intangible type of law. There's not a lot of enforcement mechanisms. Sometimes it's really just faith that in the end we will recognize and come together on these long-standing principles that can hopefully guide us through even some of the most difficult conflicts and situations. So again, and I will just say, in case this is my last time with the microphone, it's just been such a pleasure being here. Like, we've been traveling for the last couple of weeks. We've had a lot of meetings, but opportunities like this to speak directly to students and law students in particular have absolutely been my favorite events of the trip. So thank you so much for coming out today.
And Mr. Abraham Lee, do you have any advice for the students as the closing statement?
Yeah, sure. First, study hard. But I like what Jennifer said about being curious and asking questions. And we may not always know the answer, but we can always get smart, right? And by asking questions. How many of you, by the way, are from Java? Are you guys, like a lot of you from Java, Javanese? Yeah. So I know, one thing I've learned in Indonesia, the Javanese way of talking about things and asking about things is to talk like this. But don't be afraid to ask directly, and be afraid to ask the hard questions, and really feed your curiosity about issues, about subjects, about topics, and really learn, right? And the way you do that is to really ask questions. And the best lawyers I've ever been around are the ones who ask the best questions, right? And so do that and challenge your professors and challenge your teachers and your colleagues and people like us, and to ask those really hard questions, because it's going to help you as you develop and mature, and it's really going to make you a better lawyer, a better advocate, a better person, frankly, by asking those questions. So feed that curiosity.
Okay, thank you so much for Abraham Lee and Jennifer Lansidel for the insightful conversations. Now for the last sessions, can we have the participants to go to the stage and take a picture, right? Oh, okay, we will, okay, yeah. So for the panelists, shall we move to over there to take pictures? Okay.